Hello, this is the lecture for Thursday, the 4th of March, 2021, for Ancient and Medieval History. Where we were was talking about Augustus, formerly Octavian of the house of the Iuli or the Julian clan, and we were talking about some of the characteristics of his regime. And we talked about the problem of imperial succession, which is not solved by the Augustan solution. The problem of imperial succession is, of course, who becomes emperor when the old emperor dies. In a monarchy, that's known, but not when you have a system that is still officially more a republic than anything else, where the real ruler has most or all of his power unofficially, not as part of the Constitution or as part of the law. This is one reason why I say that Augustus is more similar to a mafia boss than he is to a monarch, because his power is not limited by government. It's not limited by law. He can do whatever he wants, but he's smart enough not to reveal that, not to show it. He's smart enough to give the people the impression that they're still free when they're absolutely not. Why, when he has a daughter named Julia, doesn't he have a grandson that can become emperor? Why don't Julia's husbands become the emperor? Well, at first, that's exactly what he plans. He plans to marry an adopted successor from farther away in his family, or to Julia, and she will sort of be the pathway for that guy to be his successor, the next princeps, or first citizen. Julia's first husband dies under mysterious circumstances. His name is Marcellus, a young guy, up and coming. Then Julia is married to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, the common-born admiral who won the Battle of Actium for Augustus. But Agrippa is even older than Augustus is. So Julia has been married to a man that is basically her father's age or a little more. That can work. The Romans do that sort of thing all the time, but it doesn't make for an extremely happy marriage. And of course, Agrippa dies of old age. So now Julia has been the wife of two different men. Then Julia is married to the son of Augustus's wife by a former marriage. Augustus's wife, Livia, has a son named Tiberius. And she connives, after Agrippa's death, to get Tiberius married to Julia. There's a problem, though. Tiberius is deeply in love with his wife, Vipsania. And he does not want this. His mother says, you're gonna switch wives, because that's the only way you can become emperor. And don't you want to be emperor? And he says, if the price is giving up the woman I love, no. At which point she puts the mommy pressure on him and lays the guilt on him like only a good Italian mother can do. And the result is that he divorces his wife Bassanio and marries Julia. But he doesn't love her, and that lack of love is palpable. Tiberius spends a lot of time away from Rome anyway, and it's not a good marriage. Now, everyone knew that. And most everyone knew what comes next, except Augustus. While Tiberius is away, Julia starts taking lovers. Not a lover, not a few lovers, lots of lovers. She becomes very promiscuous. And this is not to her credit. It isn't what a Roman wife should do. It isn't even what an aristocratic Roman wife, who's the daughter of the emperor, should do. It looks bad. And with all of these lovers that she has, the probability of blackmail increases to everyone because Augustus doesn't seem to know about it. He thinks his daughter is a okay wife in a less than perfect marriage. Until one day, the blackmailer writes everything down and gives it to Augustus. Augustus, through his sources and spies and agents, confirms this. And the over 50 different men that are on that list of Julia's occasional, infrequent, or frequent lovers are rousted out of bed in the middle of the night and brought to the imperial palace where Augustus lives. And they line up in a room, sort of like these three sets of tables are. Augustus comes into the room and identifies the old senators, the young citizens, and his friends, and the slave. Well, actually, slaves don't count. All the different lovers. And he said, he starts, by name, the ones he recognizes. Elias Josephus, have you slept with my daughter? Yes, Caesar. Quaternus Tribinius, have you slept with my daughter? Yes, Caesar. And he goes through this one by one by one. And then he's done and pauses. Is there any man in Rome who has not slept with my daughter? They're all sent out and punished in a variety of ways. And he exiles his daughter to the island of Pandateria. He loves his daughter. He doesn't want to do this, but she's disgraced him in so many ways. Pandateria is an island that you can walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes. It's this tiny little place. And he staffs it with guards that are absolutely unsuitable for being slept with. Men who've had injuries, things like that. So Julia's going to remain on that rock for the rest of her life, without any pleasure, without any luxuries, as a prisoner. And this breaks his heart. But he has no choice. He's the emperor. See, Augustus sees a problem in Roman society. The problem is wealth. Back in the day of the Republic, women wouldn't wear a lot of jewelry or a lot of makeup because that was considered to be decadent. It was considered to be too much, luxury-loving, bad morally. And people didn't buy many luxuries for their homes. And while there's always been infidelity between husbands and wives, especially in the upper classes, the Roman family was something pretty sacred and people kept the other stuff under wraps. But more and more young Romans in Augustus's time decided that they wouldn't marry. Or that they'd marry and divorce like you pick up a new book. You read it for a while, you finish it, then you put the book down, you pick up another new book, and you read it for a while, and you finish it, and you do that. So young Romans, instead of establishing firm families with strong foundations, good families to raise children in, were instead seeking after their own pleasure to such an extent that the children they were having were growing up a bit wild, and the Roman family as an institution was becoming really, really a problem. So Augustus launched a series of morality campaigns designed to encourage Romans to be good husbands and good wives and raise good Roman children. Because without enough good Roman children, the Roman Empire won't last. You kind of need those. His daughter flouncing around and doing all the stuff she did does not help. That's one of the reasons why he had to get rid of her. Now, for a while, Augustus keeps the empire basically the same size. There are a few areas, like in Spain, he wants to round that off and make sure the entire Iberian Peninsula is Roman. And some areas east of the Adriatic and the Balkan Mountains, there's some expansion there. But in general terms, Augustus is willing to keep the empire at the same size except Germania. The area east of the Rhine River and west of the Elbe River, the area of Germany that is basically between the Rhine here and the Elbe here, is considered by Augustus to be something that maybe the Roman Empire can have. And that would bring a lot of fighting Germans under imperial rule. And it would also shorten Rome's borders, because Rome's borders are the Rhine River and the Danube River. And the Danube River is basically like that. So that's a pretty long border. With the Elbe River as Rome's border, it's a much shorter border. Augustus's wife's nephew, Germanicus, and brother-in-law, Drusus, do some good work at bringing Germania into Rome's orbit. Yeah? No, Germanicus is named after Germany. Excellent question. What the Romans do is, if you have a victory over an enemy, you become something icus. So Claudius names his son Britannicus because Claudius conquers Britain. Germanicus is named Germanicus because his father Drusus won victories over the Germans. Claudius, there are emperors called Gothicus and Persicus because they beat the Goths and the Persians. Parthenicus, that sort of thing. So it's a Roman tradition. Excellent question. So, I think it's around 6 AD. And what happens is there's a new Roman governor there. He's not a close relative. His name is Quintilius Varus. And Quintilius Varus has an army group of a few legions. And the Germans are led by a new tribal chieftain named Arminius. Arminius, or who the Germans called Hermann, is not a barbarian. He's German, but he grew up in Rome. His father was a tribal chieftain, and they exchanged hostages. And Arminius, or Hermann, was one of those hostages. So Arminius spent years in the Roman Empire. Arminius learned to read and write Latin. He learned to think like a Roman. He learned how Romans fought. And all of this stuff had been a mystery before this. When fighting a bunch of rude Germans, the Romans have every advantage. But Arminius knows their secrets. And he is now the chieftain of a new confederation of tribes. Varus discovers that several Roman tax collectors have gone missing. And he decides that he's going to punish the Germans by marching into the German forests and burning a few villages and saying, if you wonder why, it's because our tax collectors were killed. It's a trap. Varus does not understand Germany. And he's arrogant. He thinks he understands everything he needs to know. So Varus marches three, maybe 4 legions. I think it's 3. 3 legions into the forests of Germany, east of the Rhine. He does not send out scouts. He does not send advanced riders. He just marches down the road. Singular road. So the legions are spread out like a snake along miles and miles of road. This is not good tactics. What you do if you have an army in enemy territory is you send out lots of scouts to find out what the heck's going on around you. And you don't string your army out so that it's spread across miles of space lengthwise, but it's only one, 5 or 6 men wide, width-wise. That's an invitation to get smacked from both sides, which is exactly what happens. At the Teutoburger Forest, the Teutoburger Wald in German, at the Teutoburg Forest, Varus's men are blundering their way through the German forest towards what they think are German villages, and all of a sudden, they're attacked along their entire length from both sides. The legions are utterly destroyed. Utterly destroyed. Now, Augustus has rebuilt the entire Roman economy on the basis of only having a few legions. So the loss of several legions at once is going to destabilize the entire empire's defensive strategy. When riders reach Rome, bearing the news of Varus's disaster, there's nothing between Arminius's German army and Rome. The legions that were going to be in the way are all gone. Had Arminius wanted to, he could have crossed through the Alps and attacked southward in Italy and been to Rome a few short days after word of the disaster arrived in Rome. And there was nothing that Augustus could do about it. Augustus scrapes together, sends Tiberius north with a scratch-gathered army, and he plugs the gap. But the plan to bring Germania across the Rhine into the Roman Empire is just abandoned. Rome will settle for the Rhine-Danube frontier, even though it's long. The Germans have proven too tough to conquer. Augustus knows when to stop. He's not stubborn to the point of suicide, or so he tells himself. But for the rest of his life, when Augustus cannot sleep, he is seen and heard by his servants wandering through the palace, especially when he was very old, occasionally muttering to himself, occasionally shouting at the top of his lungs, "Ventilius Varus, where are my legions?" It's a shock that in many ways he never recovers from. In AD 14, Augustus dies. He's very old by Roman standards. Did he die of natural causes? Quite probably. But there are those who believe that his wife Livia, who the conspiracy theorists say is behind the death of everyone else who might have been emperor except for her son Tiberius, through poisoning, through arranging accidents, through assassinations, through drownings, that Livia, Augustus's wife, realizes that Augustus is about to change his will and disenfranchise or disinherit Tiberius. So she poisons him. What's the truth? We don't know. We know he was old. It's totally logical that he would have died of old age. It's entirely possible that Livia had nothing to do with any of those deaths. But there is also a strong plausibility that if she was involved in those deaths, that she might very well have poisoned him. How? How can you poison a man who's afraid of being poisoned? At the end, Augustus refused to eat prepared foods. He would go out to his gardens and pick his own figs and eat them off the fig tree fresh. That way nobody could poison him. The rumor is that she went out at night when he was asleep and painted poison onto all the figs as they were growing on the tree, so that he would actually inevitably eat a poisoned fig and die.
Well, when other people also die of poison, other people probably eat figs too.
No, they were his fig trees. Right. Nobody's going to eat the emperor's figs. Believe it or not. So, Augustus is dead. Tiberius is the next emperor. I might as well write his name in just so that you see it. Tiberius. Now, Tiberius is a grim fellow. He's got dark tempers. He misses his wife, who he loved, who he had to divorce. He's angry at his mother for being a control freak. He's angry at his stepfather, Augustus, because Augustus never loved him. He wants to be loved by the people of Rome, but he's not a lovable man. He's a good general and a very good administrator. He does right by Rome. Rome is well governed under Tiberius. But as time goes on, Tiberius grows tired of ruling. See, when you're a ruler, you're basically a wishing well with legs. Everyone wants something from you. They want a special favor, or they want a job, or they want to be forgiven of a crime they're accused of, or they've got a relative. Yeah, he may be an idiot, but he needs help. So everyone looks at you, not as a person, but as a wishing well with legs. And that can be a problem if it bothers you. It didn't bother Augustus, it bothers Tiberius. He also begins to resent the fact that the Roman people do not love him. They don't seem to appreciate all the work he does on their behalf. In other words, he's a self-indulgently resentful man. It's a bad thing to indulge certain feelings in yourself, in your heart, in your mind, because they go nowhere good. One of those feelings that is not a good idea to indulge is resentment, a sense that the world owes you an apology, a sense that the world owes you anything. The world doesn't owe you a gall darn thing. It doesn't owe you respect. It doesn't owe you love. It doesn't owe you toleration. You may be lucky enough to be around people who believe that it's a good idea to be tolerant and respectful and all that stuff. But that isn't the same as the world owing it to you. And to harbor grievances, that's even worse. And Tiberius does. He's filled with grievances and fantasies of revenge. So what he does is he finds a low-born guard captain named Lucius Aelius Sejanus, who is loyal and works really, really hard. And because he's low-born, there's no chance of Sejanus becoming emperor. And Tiberius gives him more and more power. And then he retires to the Isle of Capri, a pleasure island off the coast of Naples in southern Italy in the Tyrrhenian Sea. And on Capri, he fills the place with pleasure gardens and beautiful servants of both sexes, and he begins to indulge his tastes. And Tiberius, according to the stories, has some pretty depraved tastes. Meanwhile, Sejanus is ruling in Rome. However, power is the ultimate temptation, especially for an ambitious man like Sejanus. After a while, Sejanus is not content to actually run the day-to-day affairs of Rome's government. No, Sejanus wants to be emperor. And why not? The old man on Capri isn't doing the job, and there's nobody else around that seems to be able to. Why not me, Sejanus says. So Sejanus seduces a member of the royal family and is behind her murdering her husband, and gets to the point where she's actually thinking about marrying him. Sejanus has a wife and children. He's going to divorce them. He still feels for them. He has to marry the imperial family person in order to have any chance of being emperor. Sejanus has already disappeared dozens of Romans of prominence because he said to Tiberius, these guys are conspiring against you. And Tiberius, who's willing to believe that everyone doesn't like him, is conspiring against him, signs the orders to send them away, enslave them, or kill them. Sejanus is beginning to do that to people who are loyal to Tiberius. And nobody can get to Tiberius because all messages to the emperor have to go through his praetorian prefect, the head of the praetorian guard, that's Sejanus. So Sejanus seems to have a pretty good lock on things. However, the woman that Sejanus was seducing is the niece of Tiberius. Her mother, when she learns of it, is the woman who took her daughter to her old rooms and locked her in until she starved to death. There's a son in that family, Claudius. I told you about Claudius. He's the young boy who caught the wolf that the eagle dropped. He has speech impediments. He drools, he farts, he belches. He's in disorder. He has a limp. He has a club foot. He has all sorts of personal problems. And the fact that his mother didn't kill him as a child is an amazing thing because most Roman families would have. Anyone who has that many disabilities is usually left to die on a hillside. It's not quite as stringent as the Spartans used to be, but it is done. Claudius isn't killed. Now, Claudius can't serve in the military. He becomes a historian, actually. He's not stupid. He just looks like he's stupid. And he counts on that. He counts on people underestimating him. When he finds out what's been going on, friends of his give evidence in writing about what Sejanus is doing, about how he's plotting to become emperor, about how he has hid all of this from Tiberius. Claudius goes to Capri as a member of the imperial family. He's allowed. And he brings something that he knows Tiberius will look at, a scroll of real pornography. Tiberius, again, has some pretty depraved tastes. And inside the roll of pornography is the written evidence of Sejanus' treacheries and crimes. Tiberius gets a hold of the scroll, and he realizes what's happened. He realizes that he's almost been overthrown. He orders Sejanus' number one guy to arrest and kill him and his family, including his children. Sejanus' number one guy is just as ambitious as Sejanus was. His name is Macro. So one day, Sejanus is invited to speak to the Senate. And he thinks everything is normal until he arrives at the Senate and his soldiers leave. And Macro's soldiers come and arrive. Macro arrests Sejanus and he's cast off the Tarpeian Rock. This is a fate that traitors suffer. You may have heard about it from Mr. Williams. When a Roman traitor is found, he's brought up a set of steps that's a few stories high, and they're thrown onto some sharp rocks. Now, the rocks usually won't kill the person outright. They'll just break all their bones. And the person will lie there for however long it takes for them to die, usually a few days. It's a pretty nasty way to die. And again, the Romans, they come up with stuff like this. So Sejanus is cast off the Tarpeian rocks. His wife and children are murdered by soldiers. And Tiberius is now back in charge. But Tiberius, his anger towards everyone and everything is even greater. He decides that he's going to pay Rome back for not loving him or respecting him the way he deserves to be loved and respected. And the way he's going to do this is he's going to pick as his successor the worst possible person that he can think of. Tiberius picks his nephew, Gaius, who's known by the nickname Caligula. So, after picking this unsuitable person, he elevates him to a position of deputyship. And then one day, while Caligula is at Capri, he comes out in front of the group of senators that have been called and says, Tiberius' illness has gotten worse, Tiberius is dead. And the senators are like, oh no, what do we do? Emperor, and they start calling Caligula emperor. Then they hear from Tiberius' bedroom, where's my breakfast? Apparently he wasn't dead, he was just asleep. Caligula says, oh, the emperor, hold on, senators, don't go anywhere. and he goes into the imperial bedroom with Macro. A few minutes later, they come out, and Macro says, "The emperor is definitely dead. Long live the Emperor Caligula." What happened was that Macro smothered Tiberius with a pillow until he died. There's a lesson here. If you are trying to pick a successor, don't pick someone like Caligula. Let's talk about Caligula. Caligula is the son of Germanicus. He grows up in an army camp in Germany and then in Syria. The Roman soldiers view him sort of like a mascot, and they make for him a miniature little Roman uniform with little tiny army sandal boots that are called caliges. And the boy marches in front of them and stops through the rain puddles, and they give him the nickname Caligula, which means little bootsy. Hello, little bootsy. Oh, look at little bootsy march. Stomp, stomp, stomp through the rain. Cute kid. He keeps the name Little Bootsy. His real name is Gaius. In Syria, his father Germanicus dies young under mysterious circumstances involving poison and signs of witchcraft. The rumor is that Caligula, who hated his father and wanted him dead, was able to conspire with a local witch woman and have all sorts of things appear, like his father's least favorite number, because his father's terribly superstitious, and a bunch of animals appearing where they shouldn't be. In any event, Germanicus is terrorized before he's killed, and the belief is that Caligula did it. Okay. Tiberius selects Caligula. And when people, look at him, and Tiberius, one of Tiberius's more honest moments, he says, "If Rome had but a single throat, I'd chop it through." And that's why he picked Caligula, because Caligula, Tiberius knew, would be a freaking disaster as emperor. And people would look back with love and appreciation and longing, sentimentality at the time when Tiberius was the emperor. So now Caligula's emperor, little Bootsy, and things begin to happen. He keeps his sister around, very close. And he and his sister are known to have a sexual relationship. He begins to talk about her as the new Juno and himself as the new Jupiter. Juno being the female mother of the gods of Rome, and Jupiter being the Roman Zeus. Yep, he starts talking about himself like he is a god. In fact, he looks at Jewish prophecy and says that the Messiah that was long prophesied by the Jews has come to fulfillment in me. It's not like he hides this stuff. He talks about this stuff like you or I would talk about the weather. Yep, he's a god. He's got godly blood. The reason he loves his sister is because she's got godly blood too. Between them, Rome is ruled by a god and a goddess. Caligula has all the statues of the male gods in Rome's temples chopped off and replaced with his face, and all the statues of the goddesses of Rome chopped off and replaced with his sister's face. But that's not all. Caligula impregnates his sister. And his sister begins to get nervous because Caligula is going through the logical progression. I'm a god. I'm the chief god. I'm the biggest god. I'm the Messiah god that will drive out all the other gods prophesied for Christ, but in fact is what he believes is himself. He is the new god that will drive away all the others. And he has conceived a child with his sister, who is a goddess. He, a god that sprung forth from mortal loins like the goddess Athena sprung from Zeus's forehead, and his sister, who also is a goddess, are going to give birth to a new god. A god with a god father and a goddess mother. A god that will transcend both. A god that will transcend both? A god that will be greater than his mother and father. Caligula carves the unborn child out of his sister's womb with a knife. She dies, the child dies. He's even more out there than he usually is. But he had to stop it, see, because that child god would be greater than him. He won't have that. Caligula decides that his favorite horse, Incutatus, should be a senator of Rome. So Incutatus is made a senator of Rome. Caligula decides that he is going to win some glory in battle. So he gathers the armies of the Rhine in preparation to invade Germania. However, he looks into the dark German forests and suffers a moment of fear. And instead of invading Germania, he brings his armies to the coast of the English Channel and orders them to fight the forces of his nemesis, Neptune, king of the sea. The Roman Poseidon is Neptune. So for 3 days, the legions that Caligula was going to use to invade Germania are ordered to gather seashells. And on the beach, they gather seashells. Caligula marches back to Rome and has a Roman triumph with the temple services and the slaves and the treasure. The slaves are dead fish and sea creatures, and the treasures are seaweed and seashells. And Caligula has his triumph. I don't think he has the slave beside him, remember thou art mortal, because he's a god. He's not mortal. But that's not all. Caligula had seizures, epileptic seizures, and they tended to get worse over time. So this is one of the things that he thought made him a god. It was proof, because people don't have seizures like he does. It's because divinity cannot live within a mortal shell easily. There's got to be some form of distress, and the distress comes in the form of these seizures. Caligula goes through money like it's going out of style. Tiberius and before him Augustus were frugal men. They kept Roman taxes low. They kept government expenses low. They may have ruled everything, but they didn't run things like nuts. But Caligula spends and spends and spends. So, he needs money. And he arrives at the perfect solution, the perfect Caligula solution. Little Bootsy orders every female in Rome's aristocratic families over the age of 12, regardless of how old they are, to come to the imperial palace for one night of prostitution, where anyone can go and rent the services of every Roman maiden or wife or mother or grandmother, as long as they paid. Claudius was made to be the door warden of this and collect the money. So Caligula has systematically turned every female from Rome's leading families into a prostitute. But he's a god! He has a nephew that won't stop coughing and clearing his throat, and coughing and clearing his throat, and coughing and clearing his throat. So Caligula cures him of that. You know how? Anyone want to guess? Yeah? Yeah. You can't have throat problems when you have no throat. The nephew is beheaded, and that solves the coughing problem. At this point, everyone is terrified because Caligula has the potential to lash out and kill anyone. And his Praetorian Guard, augmented by a group of German mercenaries that came down to serve him, are vicious. They'll do whatever he says. But to lead this Praetorian Guard, Caligula picks the biggest war hero of his generation. This war hero is named Cassius Kyrea. And Cassius Kyrea not only has a long history of leading men into battle, but he conducted a raid into Germania, and the German forces were pursuing him back across the Rhine, and he had to prevent the Germans from crossing at that bridge. So what he and a small group did while the rest of his army withdrew and destroyed the bridge behind him is like the old poem Horatius at the Bridge. Cassius Kyrea stays with a small unit and fights the Germans until the bridge behind him is completely destroyed, and then he ditches his armor and swims the Rhine, which is about a mile wide where he does this. That is pretty darn gutsy. So Cassius Kyrea is promoted to be the Praetorian Prefect, the head of the Imperial Praetorian Guard. These are the bodyguards of the emperor. Okay, having a war hero is good. The problem is Caligula has a sense of humor. And one of the jobs of the emperor is to decide what the call sign and watchwords are for the evening. The call sign is what people in the military say to one another in the dark to identify each other. For example, at the Battle of Normandy, the D-Day landings in 1944, our paratroopers, who were going to be landed behind enemy lines, were trained with a very particular watchword and response. When they saw a strange form in the woods, they'd say, "Flash!" And if any response other than thunder came back, they'd start shooting, because that would indicate you're dealing with a German who doesn't understand the call sign system. So Caligula every night is asked for the call sign and the response. But having a sense of humor, he says to Kyrea, "I love you." And the response, my lord, "Kiss me, Titus." So you have these manly men, Roman soldiers, walking around a nighttime palace, running into each other in darkened hallways saying, "I love you. Kiss me, Titus." And Kyrea had to pass this order to them. This war hero who cared a lot about his dignity. That's it. Kyrea concludes, he's got to die. It wasn't making his senator his horse a senator. It wasn't calling himself a god, making his sister a goddess, and then making her pregnant and then killing their child. It wasn't killing his nephew because he coughed too much. It wasn't trying to attack Germany, then deciding to attack Neptune instead, and having a full-scale triumph where they gathered seashells. It wasn't even turning every female in Rome over adolescents into prostitutes. He insulted the honor of his guard. If you ever become an evil dictator, and I hope none of you do, but if you do, don't insult your bodyguards. Don't mess with them, because they'll end you. Here's what happens. Caligula is scheduled to go to the games, to watch the gladiators. Every so often, even the emperor has to please the crowd. At the games, Kyrea arranges for Caligula to have to exit through a single tunnel, like from a stadium today, which are based on the Roman college stadiums then. And Kyrea was going to have loyal guards on both ends of the tunnel. And when Caligula and his retinue go into the tunnel, his guards will follow behind and his guards will follow ahead. And Caligula and his retinue, the people around him, are going to be murdered by them in the tunnel. And Kyrea is going to be there to make sure it works. So, Caligula's at the games, and he's, doing a little paperwork because he's not as wise as Augustus, and he's watching it a little bit. And then somebody says, "There's a delegation. There's a delegation. There's a delegation from the east coming to see you. They'd really like you to come out and say hello." And Caligula says, "Fine, okay, fine, I'll do it." So he gets up and he goes down the tunnel, and Kyrea's plan is begun. When the guards start slicing and dicing, Kyrea makes it crystal clear why he's doing it. "You insulted me." As Caligula dies, the only guy that's left alive is Claudius, because he's a phoebe. He is ridiculous. He's a figure of fun. Everyone made fun of him. Caligula was merciless to Claudius. There's no way that Claudius is a threat to anyone. So Claudius is allowed to live. Kyrea seems to be interested in the restoration of the Republic. But to do this, he's got to murder the entire imperial family. And it occurs to him Claudius is a member of the imperial family. So Claudius and the entire imperial family, which includes some kids by this point, with the second wife that Caligula got, they're all at risk. Claudius goes to the palace. He's not quite sure what to do. And what he sees are the Praetorian guards, the Romans, and the German mercenaries that guard the emperor are looting the place. If there's going to be a new republic, there isn't really much job for an imperial Praetorian guard. They're the imperial bodyguards. If there's no emperor, there's no need for them. They're going to be sent back to the regular army. So they might as well loot the palace and take what they can and, get some money out of it. But as they're looting, they find Claudius hiding behind a curtain. He's afraid they're going to kill him. And one of them gets this smile on his face. This big smile. And he hoists Claudius onto his shoulders, and they all start parading him around, calling him Imperator. Caligula is dead. The imperial guard literally grabs the oldest imperial relative out from behind a curtain, and they force him to become the new emperor. So now Claudius is going to be the emperor of the Roman world. And why do they do it? Because they don't want to lose their jobs. As if there's no emperor, there's no job for them. They go back to the regular army. If there is an emperor, whether or not he's a phoebe, it doesn't matter. They've got a job to do. So Claudius is made emperor by the Praetorian Guard. And that is where we will leave the story until next time. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, now would be a good time. I see none of them. Good. Thank you.